So many people are moving to Charlotte with no idea what it's actually like here. And I mean, that's my story, right? So before you pack your bags, blow thousands on a move, and potentially wind up someplace that you hate for years, I'm gonna give you everything you need to know right now. One video, all the pros and the worst cons, starting with living costs. People say Charlotte's cheap, but I wanna give you a really balanced look at what it actually costs to live here. So first, let's talk about the good, the pros of this. If you're moving from someplace like LA or New York or Denver or Miami or South Florida, or even a lot of places in Atlanta or DFW, you're gonna find that your monthly expenses in just about every category are substantially lower than what you're used to. If you're renting, like Steven, who just came here from Denver, he was able to get a 1 bedroom for a fraction of the cost that he was paying in Colorado. And if you're buying, like Cal and Niqua, who just moved here from New York last summer, they were able to get a spectacular 4 bedroom, very large lot, very large home that was exactly what they wanted for about $500,000, was again substantially cheaper than where they were coming from in Long Island. Even groceries and food are way cheaper here. I really love to eat out and try new restaurants, and I'll spend for myself anywhere from $15 to $25 to get a wonderful meal. Or if I'm going out with my girlfriend, then, we might spend $80 or something for a really, really nice night out, which is impossible. Places like New York, or when I travel to Dallas to see my sister, absolutely impossible. Now that's the good, but you need to know about the bad side of this. The secret of Charlotte is out. Everybody knows about it now. Prices have gone up a lot in the last few years. You used to be able to get just about anything for under $1 million here, and now you can still find a great selection. Like our median price, meaning that half of home options are below $400,000 here, but you used to not be able to spend really $1 million or much more than that, and now you can. You can spend 5, 10, 15, $20 million if you really want to. And while property taxes are a fraction of many other states, you will find that because property values have gone up, we also have property taxes going up, which, I like to have the equity, so maybe that's not a huge con, but it's still something to be aware of. And HOAs here are really common, especially on newer homes. So if you're coming from a city or a state that just doesn't have them, expect to be paying for single family anywhere from 10 to 25, maybe even as much as $100 a month. And townhomes are more, and condos, especially for luxury or upscale condos, can be a lot more. So yes, Charlotte is still relatively inexpensive, but don't come here expecting 2010 prices, because you're going to be sadly disappointed. Now, while you understand what you are going to spend here, let's talk about what you're going to make here, because the jobs and economy is also something that a lot of people talk about like it's all roses, it's all wonderful. Again, there's also some really, really unfortunate things that you need to be aware of. So the pros, it's true. Charlotte has a really strong job market. We have some of the lowest unemployment rates anywhere in the country. Banking here is huge. We're the #2, right behind New York City, the #2 banking hub. And when it comes to business in general, we've been ranked as one of the top 3 most business-friendly states for the last 5 years running. So it's a very, very great place, especially if you're a business owner. It's one of the reasons I moved here, is because it's so business friendly. But of course, this does come with a dark side that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But manufacturing, healthcare, energy, consulting, a whole lot of jobs are abundant here, especially more right brain, logical, accounting and those kind of jobs. There's a lot of opportunity for those kind of jobs. Now, the downside to all this, because Charlotte is more economical, you can't expect to be making as much money here as you might be if you're coming from the Bay or from New York. And I've seen this play out, especially in tech roles. So for instance, I've had a couple of clients that have been trying to move up from Florida now for a couple of years, and they've been really struggling to find tech jobs here. Because even though we do have a pretty strong tech market here, the jobs pay less. And for many people, even if you're keeping more money in your pocket at the end of the month after you pay your tax bill and all your cost of living, it can still be a big psychological hurdle to get over, to be taking sometimes a pretty substantial pay cut. Now, again, not to scare you, because for instance, one of the girls on our real estate team, her husband is a software developer. He recently got laid off, and it was within a week, maybe 2 weeks, I think, that he was able to find another position that he was very, very happy with another company. So obviously some of it just has to do with how hungry you are to find a new position. But there are a few industries, like if you have a federal job or if you're in film, where I would really recommend to land a position before you move, because it can be a little bit more difficult to find a good role that's a good fit for you, that makes good money, unless you do it ahead of time. So now that you know what to expect when it comes to making money, let's talk about what to expect when it comes to learning. When it comes to schools and education, Charlotte and North Carolina in general has some of the best pros and also some of the worst cons out of any of the cities or states that I personally looked at living in before I chose to move here. When it comes to public schools, Charlotte has a ton of great options to choose from, because you have publicly zoned schools where, depending on where you live, you get zoned for that. We have magnet and charter schools, which get a little bit more flexibility, and they operate kind of like private schools, but they are publicly funded. The downside to those is that they operate on a lottery system, but the upside to all of it as a whole is Charlotte has Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, which has over 144,000 students and some wonderfully highly rated school districts inside of that. There's also Union County schools, Cabarrus County schools, Iredell County schools, and Gaston County schools. Plus then, just across the border, there's also the highest rated school districts in all of South Carolina as well available to you. And North Carolina even has a voucher program where you can take your tax dollars and instead use them to be applied towards private school in a voucher system. But now for the downside. So for magnet and charter schools that operate on a lottery system, they have become much more difficult to get into than they were a few years ago, from what I've heard, because of the influx of people. And for zoned schools, even the great school district, many times will get rezoned because there's so much growth, there's so many people moving here, that just because you buy a home in an area that has a specific school that it's zoned for, that can change. And I've seen that happen, especially when people are buying a home, they're working with an agent that's not doing their due diligence ahead of time to help them make sure that this is going to be as stable of an area as possible. And on top of that, probably the number one question or comment that I get, in fact, I just got this like 2 days ago from a family I'm working with that's moving here from New Jersey, is that it's very perplexing how you might see a really highly rated high school or elementary school, but then the middle school and two of the schools are low rated or, very average, and one of the schools is awesome, or two of the schools are awesome, and then the other one's like a 2 out of 10. So if you want great schools, it's definitely possible, but it is more challenging, which is why I put together the Great Schools Strategy Quiz, which takes your specific situation, because everybody's situation and goals are a little bit different, and helps give you an idea of how feasible it is to find what you're looking for here in Charlotte. You can scan the code or click the link below to get those instant results. It's just a few quick questions and you can figure out whether or not Charlotte's going to have what you're looking for. So hopefully the schools have what you're looking for, but what about staying healthy? Well, when it comes to healthcare, Charlotte again has some great things and some not so great things. Charlotte's a large enough city. You have a lot of optionality, a lot of choices. There's 2 major healthcare networks that are, huge corporations that have lots of resources. And if that's the sort of health network you want to be in, you will have that here. Novant and Atrium are both very large, very well funded. If you don't like that and you want an independent provider, or you want to go to, an independent specialist or that sort of thing, because Charlotte has so many small towns around it, you will have that optionality. So the optionality is excellent, especially for a city of this size. But the downside to this is because Charlotte has so much employment that is driven by healthcare, and it's such a destination for healthcare, it has inflated our healthcare costs a little bit. So relative to other areas, it's cheaper, but relative to, as a percent of income, healthcare in Charlotte is more expensive than many other metros. And so it's, again, something to be aware of. And because Charlotte is such a destination, specialists are booked out further in advance here compared to the US average in many other metro cities. Now, personally, I feel like the pros outweigh the cons. And I say that because my girlfriend's in med school. She's going to be a physician, a doctor here in another year. And so healthcare is not it's a huge part of where I decide to live. And I think Charlotte has a very unique balance of whether you're working in healthcare or you just need it to stay healthy. And sure, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's because you have a lot more options here than other places. Now, you can stay healthy, but can you stay safe? So when it comes to safety and crime in Charlotte, it is a city. and it's a real city. So relative to other cities, it's got some great pros, but relative to overall safety, it might have some cons. It could be a deal breaker for you. And let's start with the pros first. Charlotte, compared to other similarly sized metros and larger cities, is much safer. If you look at Atlanta, even DFW, New York, you're going to see that Charlotte is significantly safer of a place to live. However, if you're looking relative to the national averages, it is a city. It does have crime, and it is more dangerous to live here compared to the national average that takes all the big dangerous cities and all of the suburbs and, farmland all wrapped up into one average. That said, some of the suburbs and cities around Charlotte, like Davidson, was ranked one of the safest towns in America. So there are some very safe pockets and areas around here. But again, cities have crime. Charlotte's a city. Charlotte has crime. Overall, the crime and safety is going to depend on where you choose to live. And so it's really, in my opinion, more about picking the right neighborhood or the right suburb that's going to be a good fit for you, more than it is about whether Charlotte as a whole is right for everyone. Now, if Charlotte offers the safety that you're looking for, what about getting around? What about the traffic, the transit? What is it like to actually live here and go from place to place? This is probably what I am most passionate about out of all of these, because there's some things that I absolutely love about Charlotte and some things that I cannot hate more. And so we'll start with the good things. I come from Indiana. That's where I was originally born and raised, which is known as the crossroads of America. And North Carolina, fun fact, has more, I think it's more miles of highway per population than any other state. And so it is very well connected. You can get around, and even Charlotte in particular, not just the state as a whole, but Charlotte in particular, I think they've done a very good job of keeping the infrastructure up with the rate of growth. And people will talk about how bad the traffic is, but anybody that's saying that either hasn't left Charlotte in the last 30 years or has never lived anywhere else, never left this city, and doesn't know what real traffic looks like. I think overall it's a lot better than just about anywhere that you're going to be coming from. That said though, the drivers here are absolutely god-awful terrible, and there's three types of drivers I talk about that are absolutely, like, you see them all the time, and I do not understand. Like, we have a low accident rate here in Charlotte. It is relatively safe, one of the safer cities to drive in. I don't understand how, because there's three types of drivers that drive me nuts. Number one, I call it's the left lane scroller. So somebody that's riding, going 60, 70, 80 miles an hour on the highway, and they're just on their phone, the smartphone super user, they're just going, they're doing whatever they gotta do. They're running an entire office right there from the left lane. And many times those people are also, number two, the leader of the slow parade. There's somebody that's going 5, 10, 15 under the limit. They're riding in the left lane and they are stopping up traffic, and there's no getting around them. And number three is the person that's never seen a roundabout before. There is just over there a roundabout right by my house that every single day it gets so backed up because nobody knows how to use it. Now, off the roads, many people will talk about how we have great public transit here, and it's almost true. And the reason I say it's almost true is because we do have, relative to other cities this size, great public transit. We have a light rail. There's lots of expansion plans underway. They're actually, again, right by my house, they're working on prep to put in new stations and a new line. But relative to any city that has truly great public transport, Charlotte's public transport sucks. And it's not like you need a car to live here, period. And if that's a deal breaker for you, check out Pittsburgh, because in my opinion, it's the only city that has better walkability and public transit than Charlotte for a similar cost and similar size city. Now, if you can handle the getting around here, the one thing that you may not be able to handle is what the weather's like, because even in the last 4 years, it has shifted dramatically from historically what it's been. And I want you to understand what it's really like to live here. You will not have a true winter here. You also will not have a true summer. So if you look at like the sweltering Texas heat, some people love that. My sister loves that. She lives in Texas. She loves that. You won't get that here. Some people really, really love the winters. I used to live in upstate New York, and there's so many people that love to go skiing and snowboarding and play hockey outside. And again, we don't get that either. It's very temperate here, which some people love and some people hate. If that's what you're looking for, great. If it's not, you'll hate it here. The summers are very lush and very green, a little bit humid. and they are somewhere in the 80s. Most of the winters, the highs are in the 50s or the 60s. I still play tennis dressed pretty much like this, and we'll get cold snaps where it'll get down below freezing for a couple of weeks, but it's nothing terrible. I remember one of the first times I visited Charlotte, it was probably December. My buddy from college, Max, picked me up from the airport, and we were driving around. Everything was dusted and a couple of inches of snow, and I'd just come from a project up in Boston, and so I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that we still have to deal with all the snow and all the gray and everything for how many more months? And he was like,
No, 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 no. This is super uncharacteristic. We never have this happen in Charlotte. It's always very moderate and very warm during this part of the winter. We never get snow.
and I was like,
Wait, for real?
and I saw over the coming winters after I'd moved here that it really was the case. And we haven't had hardly any snow for the last 4 or 5 years. And spring and fall, it's like living in a postcard. All of this is bright orange and yellow and red and greens. And I love to go out to the Blue Ridge Mountains, go hiking out there. And it's a huge tourist attraction too. Everybody goes out there from all over the country, specifically to drive and ride motorcycles down the Blue Ridge Parkway. And if you haven't, highly recommend. Now, enough with the temperature. Let's talk about the lay of the land, because this is one of my favorite things and one of the biggest shocks that everybody comments on here. So you can see behind me, this is not flat. I'm in the middle of the city. It's a little bit hilly. There's some rolls to this. You can't see, but over there, lots of rolling topography. And coming from the Midwest, where I was born and raised, everything is flat. Flat as a pancake. And it always throws me for a loop every time I go back home to visit my parents. The topography here is relatively flat in Charlotte compared to other parts of the state. If you go west or northwest or north of Charlotte, you can go out to Asheville, you can go into all the mountains, and we actually have the tallest peak east of the Mississippi, which is Mount Mitchell. And so if you want hiking and you're not living West Coast or in the Rockies or something, this is about as good as it gets. We also have all the coastline. And so whether you want to go to the mountains, it's an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours away, depending on where you're going. If you want to go to the beach, you can go out to Wilmington, you can go out to the Outer Banks, you can go to Myrtle Beach or Charleston, all within about a 3-hour drive. In the city, one of my favorite things too is there's little parks everywhere. And nobody understands how green and how clean of a city it is, because it was planned with all these parks in mind. If you like lake days and being outside, there's 2 different lakes, Lake Norman to the north and Lake Wiley to the southwest, both of which are very popular with boating families. So if that's you and you like to get out on the water for a day and spend all day out, go to a restaurant on a, dock restaurant or what have you, all of that's very possible, very popular, and very common. Now, the downside to this, like I said, Charlotte is relatively flat. It has just enough flatness to it that there's not any super interesting views in the city outside of the skyline, which I think is beautiful. But it is also still just has enough topography that, especially if you're looking at new construction homes, it is difficult to find a truly flat backyard. It is one of the most common popular requests I get from clients. Like, this here is unheard of, especially in new construction. So if you're looking for that, we got to start looking early, or else it's pretty hard to find. Now, outside of the land itself, what about the things to do? Entertainment in Charlotte has some wonderful things to it, but depending on what you're looking for, you might absolutely hate it. So on the good side, we have a lot of food and drink, beer scene. We have hundreds of craft breweries in North Carolina, all of which send their stuff to Charlotte. We have food truck Fridays and cultural events and tons of things to do. If you like to go see sports teams or maybe NASCAR, we are the NASCAR capital of the world. And we also have, the Panthers. We have everything except for a NHL team, which we have the Raleigh Hurricanes, or Canes as we call them, and professional baseball. But we got everything else here. Spectrum Center, it has lots of music events. If you like EDM, I love EDM. Then Black Box Theater has great DJs just about every single weekend. There are a few clubs here, but that's really the biggest con. If you're looking for a party scene, for a big nightlife scene, there's a lot of bars and pubs here, but it's more like going out with your friends to catch up and talk, and not so much like a party scene. So if that's what you're looking for, you're probably going to hate it here. But there is still a lot of great nightlife that's not as wild. And I will add the other big con here is we do get some pretty large events. Like this past weekend, there's a big, I think, PGA Tour golf event here. When those events do occur, all the hotels get super expensive. Traffic gets crazy and it can be hard to get around because we are a pretty big destination, especially with the American Airlines hub here. Lots of big events that bring people from all over do happen here. And so it can get kind of pricey during those times. And so if you don't like having stuff like that in your city, then you also might hate it here. So that covers the things to do on, say, the weekend or special occasions. But what about the things to do, the living, the lifestyle on the day-to-day? This is probably the biggest reason I personally chose to move to Charlotte. Is the day-to-day lifestyle here in the South is very different. Again, it's not for everybody, and we'll talk more about why it's not for everybody here in just a second. But the pros, and maybe this is a con for you, the things that I love, there are parks everywhere. We have over 210 parks here in Charlotte, and so the city is very green. It's one of the top 20 cleanest cities in America, and so it's very, very clean, very green. It's got a much slower pace than if you're coming from the Northeast or even coming from the West Coast. When I was getting licensed as a real estate broker, my brother-in-law, I was shopping for a new car and he was like, oh, what are you going to get? Especially with lots of brokerage clients, you'll probably want to get something that's a little bit nicer so that people know that you're, actually have your stuff together. And I was like, no, that might be the case in Texas, in DFW, but here I've had high net worth clients that I've worked with who were driving, a 5-year-old Honda. You would never guess that they're worth well into the 8, sometimes even 9 figures based off of the car that they were driving, because there's not the same culture around posturing and trying to prove that you are somebody here, at least not to the same degree many other places. Obviously, that's a human thing. So everybody does that to some degree. You'll notice when you go to work, when you talk to people about what they did over the weekend, everybody's got some sort of a hobby that they're really passionate about, or they're spending time with their kids or their grandkids, and they're getting out, they're enjoying the outdoors, they're doing things like, personally, I love to play tennis. So guess what I'm doing right after I finish shooting this video? I'm going to play tennis. And guess who I'm playing tennis with starting next month? A couple of my clients that are moving here from California who also love to play tennis, love to get out and play sports, and they're also going to get plugged in with that same network because, again, everybody here is very, very friendly and they love to connect people and get to know new people. And before I get into the cons, one final note on this. Other places that I've lived that had, a lot of high performing, very driven people, because not every area has a lot of those kind of people, but, this is banking and very, a lot of consultants and business owners live in Charlotte. And all those kind of people here tend to have hobbies and ways that they meet people and network outside of work, which I just didn't feel like was the same case other places that I've lived. But now, for the downside to the negatives of all of this, the biggest thing has to be if you really like having a layer of privacy, a layer of not getting to know people or talk to people too much. Personally, I don't care about that, right? I talk to all my neighbors. I love it. If that's not you, if you don't enjoy that, you will not enjoy it here. And some people, they come here and people talk to them in line at the grocery store or when they are out grabbing dinner, and it's kind of weird. They can't get used to it. And so if that's you, if you're not a friendly person, stay away. You won't enjoy it here. But if you are a friendly person, I think you'll really enjoy it. Also, depending on where you're living, because the entire area is growing so quickly, you will see and hear construction very frequently, especially if you're living in an area or buying a home in an area that is growing really rapidly. And one other thing that I've noticed just even recording this video, but whenever there's humidity, you will also get bugs. And so I've smacked a couple of mosquitoes off of me. Again, it's not all year round. During the winter, there's no bugs, but keep your bug spray nearby. So the city's clean and it's green, but what is the overall vibe? What does it feel like to actually live here? And there's, again, some really good things to this and some really not so great things to it. So I'll start with the good. The city itself is very diverse. It has a very diverse set of neighborhoods and suburbs, and each of them has a very different feel. And even the ones that are very similar on paper, like Belmont and Mount Holly, for instance, very similar on paper. They're even located very close to each other, but the feels are a little bit different. And so some people really love one, some people really prefer the other. There really is something for everybody here. If you want the lively nightlife and going out and lots of stuff to do and everything's walkable, you could go to South End or Dilworth or a handful of different neighborhoods. But if you want something that's a little bit more almost rural, but large lots and out there, there's Mint Hill and there's other, parts of Concord. There's a lot of options for you, and there's something in between. So there really is something for everybody. But that said, if you're looking for, on the negative side, something that's going to have all one feel where the entire city feels the same, you're not going to find that here. And probably the biggest criticism is that because Charlotte has so many right brain, meaning, logical, like consulting and banking and finance and those kind of jobs here, the overall feel of the city can feel kind of cold to people that are more creative. And so, especially if you are in a more creative line of work or you're just a more creative person, please, please, please come check it out, feel it for yourself, because someplace like Atlanta might be a much better fit. Now, personally, I'm an engineer by training, by background. I was a robotics engineer before I got into real estate. So I feel at home here. I really love it. And getting to meet lots of engineers and consultants and banking, finance, tech, those kind of people are my kind of people. It's a lot of fun, but it's not for everyone. So we've talked about the feel of the city, but what about the feel of the people? Southern hospitality is such a real thing here. Again, people stop and talk to you in line at the grocery store, when you're at a restaurant, or if you're just out and about walking around, and it's not weird to have a conversation, just strike up a conversation. Some people hate it. Personally, I love it, but it's up to you to decide. A lot of people will comment on how Charlotte doesn't have a really coherent cultural identity. Part of that's because we've grown really fast, but especially if you compare it with like the West Coast, sometimes people coming from California are not used to the fact that we have like a 200 or 300-year-old history. Now, on the flip side, there's a lady I've been talking to that's originally from, I think, Austria. And so she's on the exact flip side where she's like, wow, it's only, 200 or 300 years of history. That's nothing compared to Europe. And on top of that, when you look at the culture between like the suburbs versus uptown, it can feel like two completely different worlds, two very different types of people between the fast pace versus the slower. And the fact that the entire city is really easy to commute, you can go from the suburbs to the center of the city, the heart of the city, in 20, 25 minutes. It can be a little bit jarring to some people if you're used to, again, a more cohesive feel and vibe. And really, one of my biggest criticisms of the city as a whole is there's so many people that have come here, and it's grown so quickly that on the good side, it feels kind of like the first day of school because everybody's trying to meet people and make friends. But on the negative side, it can be sometimes really hard to get plugged in. After having lived here now for, 4 or 5 years, it is very important to find activities you can get plugged into early to meet people that have common interests and start to build your network here. So for me, I wish I had gotten plugged into tennis and playing tennis competitively because that was what I did growing up. And so that's one of the ways I love to meet people and make friends. I wish I had started doing that much earlier. And if you have something similar to that, maybe it's tennis, maybe it's softball or pickleball or soccer or art and painting or music or EDM, rave culture, like whatever it is, get plugged in and meet people so you can start building your network and social circles here as early as possible, and you'll enjoy the city a lot more as a result. Now, outside of the people, one of the top, if not the top reason that people move here is, well, I won't say politics, it's more the political climate here. An America that is very politically charged one way or the other, Charlotte and North Carolina in general is one of the most neutral places, or moderate places maybe is a better word, that you can go. So the state as a whole is about a third red, a third blue, and a third independent neutral. Depends on the year, depends on whatever. People who are independent free thinkers. And one of the top comments I get, don't shoot the messenger, that people love about moving to both Charlotte and to North Carolina is that it is not heavily charged one way or the other. And people put people first, not politics first. And it's a much more human and kind way to live life and approach life, in my opinion. I really like it, and so do a lot of the people that move here. So if you're trying to get away from the political climate wherever you are and just go somewhere where it's not nearly so important and a lot more reasonable, North Carolina, and Charlotte in particular, is a great place to be. Now, that said, one of the phrases you'll hear many, many people repeat is, if you're moving here to get away from policies that created an environment you didn't like, leave those where you're coming from, whatever they are, and just move to Charlotte for Charlotte's sake, move to North Carolina for North Carolina's sake. So if you feel like Charlotte might be worth exploring more and you're not quite sure whether or not it's the place for you, but you think that it could be, every time one of my friends asks if they should move here, there's always 7, 8 questions that I always ask to see if it's a fit for them, and more importantly, what areas in Charlotte, because all the different areas, there's over 200 neighborhoods, there's over a dozen different suburbs around the city. And so if you would like to get your own instant personalized set of recommended areas and a list of homes to browse through so you can actually see what homes in those areas cost and look like, you can take a quick 8-question quiz that I put together for you. Scan the code or click the link below to go take that and get instant quiz results. That'll again hopefully help you decide whether or not Charlotte might be a place that's worth more serious consideration. And if you're seriously considering moving, you just want to do as much research as possible before getting that list of recommended areas for you. You can also watch this video here that'll break down all the different top neighborhoods of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Make Charlotte home.
Make Charlotte home.
Make Charlotte a home.
Make Charlotte home.
Make Charlotte home.
Make Charlotte home.
My home buying experience was fantastic.
Communication was great.
They're attentive, communicative, understanding of where you're at.
We never felt like we were on our own.